Hey guys, in this chapter of Digital Greed, we're talking about a strategy a little bit more advanced than just the general flipping that was in the previous chapter. With that one, we didn't necessarily care if the item was actually going up or down in price. As long as we could do that entire flip within a short range of time, the exact movement of the price over time didn't matter. This strategy relied more on how that price action was changing over time. So maybe one day the price was going down, next it was going up. But this was a market timing strategy. We're trying to make a profit off of that change in underlying value rather than just making really short price flips. So this worked pretty well with a single item. What we will do is watch the daily change of the central market suggested price. So as long as there was enough volume, that price would change somewhere between negative 5% and positive 5% every day. So the central market would try to adjust that suggested price based on supply and demand. So a trader who's trying to time the market like this, ideally, would find an item that's switching from negative to positive or positive to negative. Now, if you don't have any of the item to sell at the peak, but you have a lot of GC to spend, you would most likely be looking for items bottoming out and then rebounding, and then you would try to buy that item right at the bottom. Now, the best way to do this was to watch the daily CM suggested prices. So a lot of times when an item was in a downtrend, every day it would drop 2%, 3%, 4%, maybe even 5%. If nobody really wants to buy the market anywhere close to the suggested price, a lot of people would be trying to sell at the minimum price, which is oftentimes referred to as CM minimum. And so you could try to sell that item for the minimum price you can. No one's buying it. So what happens is maybe the next day the price updates and the new suggested price is the previous day's minimum, and there's a new minimum that's even lower. So you can cancel that order, place it at the new minimum or lower. So a lot of times an item would be in a downtrend where for a few days in a row it was extremely difficult to sell on the central market, and everyone just keep renewing their orders by placing it at the minimum. So if you're a trader trying to time the bottom of this, you would occasionally throughout the day place an order to buy it just to see at what point the price moves off of that minimum price. If it buys for the minimum, you can try to resell it at that or just hold on to it for the rebound. But as soon as you notice that it does not instantly purchase for that minimum price, it means everyone that was trying to sell desperately at the minimum price had been able to sell, and the amount of inventory was less. So then you could place an order at the minimum price or slightly over to try to just buy as many of those items as you can. And this isn't a quick flip. You aren't immediately trying to sell. You're trying to just buy as many of those items as you can. In some cases, when I did this, I actually had friends within the game that would help me buy more of that item. So they would buy I would buy my entire 4-hour limit of that item, and I might want more. So I might have a friend buy the full 4-hour limit and then just sell them to me during a person-to-person trade, because there were no limits for trades that were just between two players and not on the central market. So if I really wanted to buy a lot, I'd have a group of friends all buy me their full 4-hour limit's worth and then sell to me in a normal trade. But the idea is that once that price comes off of CM min, that flippers can start flipping it again, because if it's below min or above maximum, you can't flip it because very little trading is going on the central market. So then once the flippers come back in after the price just starts to rebound, a spread forms and there's a slightly more demand, and let's say the next day the price drops again to the new average price, well then the item's price might be above the last suggested price. So it'll look like the trend's down, but if the price starts trading above the suggested price, you can anticipate that the following day the price will start going up and that there'll be a rebound. So you can ideally time it to where you're buying it on that last down day, and then once the price turns green for one day, other people recognize it's green, they buy in hoping kind of for the same trade, but you already bought in. So on that first green day, the price actually might jump to the CM maximum price as other traders try to buy in. And then you could start selling some of your own items, and maybe you'd make 5% or 10% or even 15% if the rebound takes at least 2 or 3 days to complete. So for me, this was a lot less time consuming than the normal flipping, because the normal flipping you have to flip dozens of different items and you're constantly updating orders, finding new spreads, that type of stuff. This one you just concentrated on one item, trying to determine the exact bottom of the market, and it is in one point of time, so you don't have to be constantly playing. Once you do anticipate that the market is bottoming, you just buy as many as you possibly could. Sometimes you could buy enough to where you're actually having an impact on the price of that item. But anyway, you just buy as many as you can. As soon as the daily price changes start reflecting a change in price, other traders jump in, starts to push up the price. Other regular players who buy in, who are also kind of waiting for the bottom, but maybe they missed it, they start buying in, price starts going up, and then you sell for a 5, 10, 15% profit. The margin's a lot higher than the regular flipping. You needed more GC to trade like this. If you don't have much GC, you can't buy much supply, so it would make sense to do some of the regular flipping. But I was lucky in that I was able to start with this type of trading pretty soon after the central market was added. So that's for one item. On the exact same strategy, but with multiple items, it was a bit different. After the central market was added, the market was a little bit unstable for a while. There were a few occasions where pretty much the entire player base panicked and sold a lot of their higher end items. If the price starts dropping to the point where they couldn't sell their best weapons or armor, even at the minimum price in the central market, kind of cascaded until everyone trying to sell. Most of them needed those items to play the game normally, so they were just hoping to sell it and then rebuy it lower if it crashed. It's the exact same psychology in other markets. People could panic just as hard as in the stock market or in the cryptocurrency market, but sometimes just the entire market panicked, sold off all their high-end weapons. The price would drop to the CM minimum. It would become impossible to sell. The very next day, they just all automatically renew their orders at the new minimum price. They didn't care if it was cheaper than what they bought it for or what was going on. It just, everyone was selling, so then everyone just joined in and sold even more of them. So there were a couple occasions where the price for these items dropped 20 to 40% in just a single week. Wasn't really heard of before the central market was added, but just the dynamics of the market, people trying to understand it, people trading on it, kind of triggered these panics. But on the opposite side, the prices would rebound just as strong. So this was an incredibly profitable trade if you could time it well. And the other good thing about these trades is that since these are the higher end armor and weapons, their prices were high, and so you could deploy a lot of capital in a trade like this. So around this time, I probably had 1, maybe 2 billion GC in total from trading for the last 2 or 3 years. So when I saw a market trend like this, I'm like, well, if I could go all in and then all out a few days later and make 15% or 20% or 25% or whatever, I could make 200, 300, or maybe even more million GC just in a few days. And I wouldn't have to worry about tracking individual items, and I wouldn't have to track all the little spreads for the smaller items I was trying to flip. You just put all your money in, wait for it to rebound 20 or 30%, and then cash out when the opposite sentiment took over and everyone was trying to rebuy into these markets. So these were kind of some of the funner trades because the sentiment went from extremely negative to extremely positive in such a short period of time. And this was very similar to trading cryptocurrency because sometimes the cryptocurrency markets will drop 20 to 40% in a week and everyone's panicking and they think the bull market's over, where everything's going to collapse or the government's going to ban it. Whatever the reason, like everyone's worst fears, they start thinking about those and panic and sell off. But the markets can turn around incredibly fast, and then all of a sudden everyone's bullish and they're all buying back in. And sometimes it's best to buy when the panic is at a peak and then sell at a when all that subsides, then everyone's rushing back in. So that's how this is related to the cryptocurrency market, but makes it in the gaming market, it made it a lot funner than just flipping items, because you had to have some skill in timing this. If you could see other well-known traders in the game, get their opinions, they might start buying in at one point. You might think they're too early. You might be the first one to start buying in. But anyway, this was, for me, super fun trying to figure out how to time all of this. And this type of market timing in the game was significantly easier than elsewhere. So it was also still kind of training for other markets. In other markets are much more efficient than the market I traded here, but it was good to trade. And very similar switch in psychology and sentiment.